Well, welcome, friends. My name is Unton Eller, and I'm the technical support for your webinar today. And I'm glad to be helping bring this webinar out to you, whether you happen to be here in the States or across the Atlantic in England. So good evening to you all that are joining us from the UK, or perhaps other places in the world as well. Glad to have you all here. Just a few quick housekeeping items as we begin. If you notice up in the upper left, you'll see the chat window where we've been greeting you and you've been able to share your greetings with others. Please make active use of that window to make your comments and questions for our presenter and to keep us on our toes and to be as interactive with this webinar as you can. That's your way of being able to be a part of that. Also, if you see directly above me, you'll see our upcoming webinars. As well, if you scroll down that window, you can see all the recordings we have for the other things that we've done this year. Those are all available for you if you go to www.brethren.org/webcasts. And so please join us for those that are yet to come up. But we're really glad that today we have our special presenter, Rob Schellert, and I'm going to turn it over to Stan Dewick here in a moment to introduce Rob. But one more thing, if you want continuing education units for the Church of the Brethren, I'll give you those instructions after the webinar is over. Those are available for those of you that are here live. I'm sorry that we can't offer those for those joining us later by way of the recordings, but stay tuned towards the end and I'll share that information for you. So without further ado, Stan, let me turn it over to you.
Thank you, Anton, and it's so good to have everyone with us today, and I'm really looking forward to this presentation. The title of our presentation today is Experiencing Gentrification in the East End of London with Squatters and Anarchists. Today, during our webinar, we're going to think and reflect on how our world is becoming more urban, with over half of the planet's population living in urban communities. As a result, our cities, our communities are facing the growing problem of gentrification, where we see the influx of affluent people into neighborhoods that displace poor residents. And therefore, the outcome is it changes the character of the neighborhood. It changes the character of the community as well. And in this webinar, Rob is going to help us explore how the process of gentrification has affected marginalized communities and how we might respond. It's a pleasure to present to you Rob Schellert. He has experience as a church planter and is now walking alongside London's radical anarchists and squatter communities. And Rob's experiences and passion for the forgotten, the marginalized, and those who have given up on the church has resulted in a unique perspective that he has and which he's going to share with us. And he's going to share with both those inside the church and those whose experiences have kept them from a church threshold. And so, Rob, it's a great pleasure to have you with us today. We're looking forward to your presentation, and welcome. And so call you and just let you to tell your story and to help us to reflect on this important topic. Rob Schellert, everyone.
Okay, welcome to my home, and this is East London. This is a bit interesting, a bit weird. I'm talking to you like this. For all I know, you're making silly faces at me. I can just say that I got into looking at gentrification the last few years because I go to church meetings and they're not dealing with the issue. I go to white majority churches, and they don't talk about it. And I go to black majority churches and they don't talk about it either. And just my experience is that white majority churches are privileged and middle class, and so we enjoy the benefits that comes along with gentrification. And black majority churches, they just stay within their own community. They don't break out into their community. And as a result, I find myself frustrated and wondering, what does the church have to say about gentrification? And what does the gospel look like? Gentrification is such a big topic. I could easily go overboard with this and only have about 50 minutes. So my idea is just to give an introduction of what gentrification is and how it has affected me with the people I've been journeying with and with anarchists and squatters here in the East End of London. So basically, gentrification, the word comes from an old French word just meaning of gentle birth, comes from the 14th century. And sociologist Ruth Glass, an English sociologist, she coined the term gentrification in 1964 to describe the influx of middle-class people who are displacing lower-class residents in urban neighborhoods. And her example was in London as well, and the working classes in Islington, which is not that far from where I live now. And the common definition of gentrification is the process of describing the influx of affluent people into our neighborhoods, which displaces poor residents, thus changing the character of the neighborhood. And this is common definition, and it just needs to, and its gentrification happens when there is improvements in the following areas. In areas of shopping, education, transport, and social life. If any of these factors, one of these factors or more combined, they influence the process known as gentrification. And oftentimes the factors are interrelated with one another. And by shopping, we mean everything from renting a place to live, buying a house, the stores we shop at, what kind of stores, education, and talking about schools, and transport like buses, roads, the subway we take, and social life is about improvements and like cinemas we go to, public places, parks, for example. So and the improvements in, for example, in education, if a school improves really in an area, that would influence shopping, and the house value will go up by 10%. And so it's they are relate to one another. And I found this out by talking to a real estate agent, and he told and asked him point blank, what are the factors of gentrification? And these are what he told me. And I asked my various friends in Portland, Brooklyn, Berlin, and they all said these are the same things that are happening in their neighborhoods. And I can tell you that shopping has, in where I live, improvement in cinemas. We've seen education Hackney schools, where I live in East London, used to be some of the worst schools. And transport, we used to have wait really bad, really long time for a train. And in social life, it wasn't necessarily a nice place to hang out, to socialize with your friends. And there are two things I want to note, that improvements are not necessarily a bad thing. And our cities, our neighborhoods need improvement. Our neighborhoods need renewal. You know, we grow and things break down. Even the Bible talks about how the earth is longing for renewal. But the issue is that not everyone gets to benefit from the improvements, from regeneration projects. And so gentrification happens when there's room for development. It doesn't happen in places where places are already developed. In Hackney, where I live in East London, there has been massive room for development for the last 30 years, last 20 years, since the 80s. But then we have lots of empty warehouses, derelict buildings, vacant lands. And we had the 2012 Olympics nearby, where I live, about maybe 10, 15-minute walk from my house. And the Olympics really put a spotlight on my neighborhood and really caused things to change. As you can see, I'm a white, middle-class, male, privileged person, and it's very easy to not think about gentrification. If you can afford it, you can afford the nice things and everything. And so my journey with dealing with these issues of gentrification related is a few years ago, me and my wife, we stopped working with a previous church, and my wife and I, we felt God was calling us to journey with anarchists and squatters in East London. And Hackney, where I live in East London, has historically been known for radical politics. Simple definition of anarchy: it's just democracy without government. Everyone has a direct participation in saying what happens. In squatters are those who live in unoccupied spaces, houses, warehouses, and whatnot. So me and my wife, Vicky, we felt compelled to move to East London, and an area where of London that is historically known for radical politics. And Hackney, at the time, was considered to be one of the fourth most deprived area to live in England. And so I started to look around my neighborhood to see where anarchists can be found. And I found a squatted social space for the local community run by anarchists on a road that was known as Murder Mile, due to a lot of murders taking place in that road in a short stretch of time. And the space was called Off Market. And I started to drop by the space on a regular basis and for a cup of tea and get to know the anarchists who ran the space. And in the social space, ran a lot of workshops such as language lessons and practical life skills such as cooking, bike repairs, and gave free haircuts, and had a free shop where people could bring things they no longer needed, and people can take things as well. So after lots of people from the community would come to the place every week, and I saw Jesus' values at work in this place, and I started to affirm these values and the things they were doing. And the people who were come to these doors were often from working classes, immigrant communities, refugees as well. And after our first location, we opened up a second shop front when we were kicked out by the police. And the off market, they asked me if I would help run the place and join them. And I found myself as being like a chaplain to the people who were part of the anarchist space, and get to know the people who came through the doors. Anarchist friends would invite me and my wife over to the squats to have dinner, and we would come into the place and listen to their stories and have a meal with them. In turn, we've been able to share our lives with them, share about who we are as Jesus followers. Here we go. So as a result, anarchists have come to us to talk about what's going on in their lives and talk about their depression. Once I was asked to perform a blessing over a new squat. Someone opened a new building, and they asked me to come over and speak a blessing over the new home. I've been asked to do a baby dedication for some anarchist couple. And on Christmas Day, I was on anarchist radio program, not an internet radio, but FM radio, to talk about my faith and talk about the significance of Jesus on Christmas Day on an anarchist radio show. So really got to know these people. When our anarchist friends found out that my wife and I were having a baby, our friends organized a baby shower to help celebrate our good news. In the weeks leading up to the birth of our daughter, they went dumpster diving for baby-related items, going through the skips, looking for toys and clothes and collecting clothes from people for everything. And problems with mouse. And meanwhile, in the run-up to the London 2012 Olympics, gentrification was starting to tear up our neighborhoods. And we saw tension started to rise between classes of people. And it wasn't a great time to be in our part of town, in our area. There were a lot of protests and class war, for example, and squatters were being forced out of their empty buildings as developers develop places and properties get bought up. I just remember there being eviction like 3 times a day during the height of the summer, and part of our eviction phone tree, and I get a text message to support people who are being evicted from their homes, and we would show up at the homes and form a peaceful resistance against bailiffs and to stop them from evicting people, both tenants who pay rent or tenants who are squatting as well. So I just want to share 2 videos. If Ethan, we can bring up the first video. The carpenter one, yeah, that's it. And this video was about a group of young mothers who were served eviction notices by the housing association. They made a big campaign out of it. They were called the Focus E15. You might have heard of it. Basically, the council cut funding for house funding for young homeless people, and these single young homeless mothers, they started a campaign. They approached the council for help, and these mothers were advised that due to cuts in housing benefits and lack of affordable housing in London, that they would have to set private accommodation far away as Manchester or Birmingham, for example, 3 hours, 2 hours away from where we live. So this attempt to displace the mothers from London, removing them and their children from local support network, families and friends, is just one example of citywide process of social cleansing, with low-income people being forced out of London. And I was part of this protest, and I brought my daughter with to this place a few times. And my friend Greg, he shot a documentary about them, and he kindly let me use clips of these videos to show you.
You ready for it to roll then?
And so, can we play?
Put a lock on the gate, yes, I've squatted a greenhouse in your heart. I've squatted a greenhouse in your heart. So many souls without a place to sleep, 80,000 empty hearts in London at least. So I'm keeping your heart occupied. Squatters don't eat babies, the Evening Standard lies. And I've squatted a greenhouse in your heart.
Well, I'm one of the 29 mums from the hostel for C15, and in August last year we were handed eviction notices to say we had to leave our properties, and the council tried to send us to places like Manchester, Hastings and Birmingham. So we've been highlighting the issue of homelessness, people being socially cleansed and local housing in the area. All these luxury apartments and buildings that are being built, but they're not affordable for the local people. Local people are being pushed further and further out of London, and then the super rich, like foreign investors and bankers, they're buying properties and leaving them empty. So the population of London is just going to go down and down.
And these flats have been empty for how long?
These ones, the ground floor has been empty for 6 years, the top floor is 4 years, but some of the properties on the estate have been empty for over 8 years.
Yeah, and there's a lot of empty properties on this estate, isn't there?
Yeah, definitely. There's a few hundred on this estate alone, and there's so many estates across London of the same
Similar thing. So I mean, to me, it seems obvious that the real crime is that, and not the actual squatting of an empty building. It seems pretty clear. What do you think can be done to get the authorities to kind of realise that we should be occupying these homes legally, so then there isn't all the hassle, and then there isn't a need to spend money on security guards wasting time and on police helicopters coming and aggravating you? Is there anything you think we can do with the authority to make them understand that?
Yeah, well, I think just everybody standing together, people standing in solidarity with each other and fighting for the same thing, because social housing is a basic human right, and social housing is a system that actually works for the people. But the council, they were still profiting from social housing. It's not like they're losing out on any money. They're losing out more money by putting people in private rents that are insecure.
Yeah.
So it just doesn't make any sense whatsoever. So I think if everybody just stands together and shows the people in power that they work for us and we don't work for them, that's the main thing, I think.
Stretch out for thousands of miles. I've squatted a greenhouse in your heart. I've stuck a section 6 on your arm.
Okay, so there's just one example of people being affected by gentrification. Basically, in that estate is right by the Olympic site, and the whole estate, maybe, I don't know, like quite a number of homes on that estate. Um, um, and the council wanted to sell the whole estate to developers, and because it's prime location, and move everyone, and the whole estate has been empty for a while. And should take some questions.
Rob, thanks for sharing your story. I'm just impressed by the relationship that you and your wife have worked or developed with the people in these communities. There are some questions here, and Tom asked, how can we or others make sure that improvement or development doesn't turn into gentrification? What might be some ways that we as the church or just individuals or groups can go approach that?
That's going to get into the next half of the webinar. So I will hopefully I will answer that in the second half to explore the impact, and then the second half I'll explore how we can respond.
Okay. And then also Jim is asking, he says, squatting was made a criminal offense in 2012. And Jesus is our Lord, and there are justice issues in some of the problems in London. How does keeping the law of the land fit with this in a biblical?
For those who want to understand what the comment was, squatting was a civil offense before 2012, meaning it was just between the squatters and the owner of the property. So now there was a law passed in 2012, and now the police can arrest you and take you to court, and you can face jail time. The question, I think for me, that if Jesus is Lord, that we're proclaiming that that we're not going to always follow the law of the land. I think it's some laws are contrary to the values of Jesus, and just because it's the law doesn't mean that it's a good law. It's a just law, and values justice. Part of justice, biblical definition of justice, is caring for the vulnerable community, and that must be our priority. So that would be my take on it.
It would seem as well that where Jesus is sharing, on many occasions about, giving aid to the poor, and when we think of the Sermon on the Mount, that it's not just an idealistic kind of way of being, but it's expressing the values of the kingdom of God. And so if we're going to be serious about our faith, then we have to weigh this in terms of the law of the land, but then also what are the values of the kingdom, and how might we address those with in terms of kingdom values. And so it's a tension to work with. Eric says, ask, it seems you have done a lot of work building relationships with people in your community and reaching their needs. What role do you think the church should play addressing the broader legal aspects of gentrification, such as rent normalization and community land trust?
Well, the church should be playing a huge role in this. We're called to be agents of reconciliation. We're called to be social architects and bringing people together, and caring for the vulnerable is a big part of the gospel. And for so long, we made the gospel into a spiritual thing, but it's about how we live our life now and what does good news look like in different ways.
And then let's get one last statement by Mike Pierce. He says, it seems like the powers involved in gentrification are almost overwhelming. Is there a sense of hope still in the squatter community, or is this the end of squatting in cities like London and Bristol?
It's losing hope. A lot of squatters are being forced out of London. I hear stories, same thing in Bristol. And so I talk to a lot of them. They feel hopeless, and it's overwhelming. And then just intensifies the feelings they have for wealthier people and middle class people. So feels like the divide become even harder. So it's a dying hope, but I believe this is where we can step in as a church and be good news and to proclaim a new reality. Jesus proclaimed a new reality, and he also reclaimed a new reality for people, reclaiming the way life should be lived, such as healing the sick, including the poor, visiting women, the Samaritan, for example. He reclaimed the way life should be lived, and we need to reclaim our communities as a place where everyone lives side by side.
Just one last comment here is that Lynn and John Stoner asked that they were in your area some time ago with Phil Warburton with Urban Expression, and they're wanting to know, how does your organization, or what you do, compare with Urban Expression?
I'm part of Urban Expression, I guess I'm not a traditional urban expression group. So I would say that most urban expression groups are more location focused, and I'm more people focused. And there's a tension of being called to a place and being called to a people group as well. Once upon a time, we can be called to a place, but we live in a rapidly changing city. So I guess my patch goes all the way out of East London, for example, south of the river, and yeah.
Well, I'll tell you what, I'm going to ask, we'll get back to some of these questions, but I'm going to step aside so you can continue with your presentation.
Sure. So one more video we can show. This video I want to talk about is the video of my friend Martin, and he's a well-known anarchist. He's a he's a really interesting guy. And he started the group Class War, and he started other organizations such as movements against monarchy, and and he started a protest of a new build of flats in the east end of London, and what a lot of developers are doing are building luxury flats, and as well as building for not regular flats as well, for social housing. But a lot of these places are being built with two entrances, one entrance for the rich and one entrance for those who are not wealthy. And for another example of social cleansing, segregation of our city.
Call it the Manhattanization.
Just play that video.
And most of the people that are born here, that have lived here, have been forced to move out because the rents have become absolutely incredible, probably double their wages. There is some social housing around here, and there are a few DOS houses and so on, but not much. It's all going to the rich. Now, we haven't been able to do anything to stem this tide of yuppification and Manhattanization. But what really angered some of the local residents around here is when we found out that although there is social housing here, that the people using the social housing have to go around the alleyway at the back to their own separate entrance, which is full of needles from junkies, cans from alcoholics, and vomit from the party goers that use it as a sort of toilet. And so the rich go in that door and the poor go in through the poor doors. About 6 months ago, we started to mount a picket here. About 30 people turned up. It was organised by the Anarchist Class War group, but it pulled in quite a few local residents and quite a few sympathisers and quite a few people that were just passing by on their way home from work. We maintained it for about 6 months. I think our lowest figure was about 30, average was about 40, but one night we actually got along about 200, 250 people. As we started, there wasn't many police, but towards the end, the whole entrance was completely blocked by the police, which was good for us because it stopped them from getting in. So basically, we mounted the picket right here outside the door. And this is the poor door. No chandelier, no concierge, no comfy seats, nothing.
Yeah, do you think this whole poor door, rich door thing is common around the whole of London, or is it?
Well, it was going to become common, but since this, apparently several other schemes have abandoned it. Yes.
Yeah.
Although there is another scheme down the road where the old Murdoch Press used to be. They're not actually building any poor doors. What they're doing is they're having a kind of a segregation where they have the big development for the rich, and then just outside there's the social tenants bit. But there's no poor doors.
Okay, there's just two examples of protests that have been happening. People trying to respond to gentrification and trying to reclaim their city, what they think it should be. So following the off-market place I was part of, our first space became a money exchange place, and then it became a real estate agent selling really expensive homes. And then our second place we opened, it became a trendy barbershops for those who have money. The the street that is formerly known as Murder Mile is now lined with expensive wine shops, coffee shops everywhere, and secondhand shops where you can buy a pair of jeans for £150, which is I don't know, $200 at least for a second-hand jeans. As followers of Jesus, we are called to live in light of our future. In Revelation, we find a picture of what that looks like. You know, every tribe, every people group from economic, social, racial background living side by side in shalom, in harmony, in peace. And as followers of Jesus, we need to ask ourselves, what does that look like? And how do we reclaim our neighborhood as a place where everyone can live side by side? To understand how gentrification works, we need to understand how cities have grown over the years. For example, historically, humanity has been nomads. They've been hunters, and then as society developed, we developed farming skills. So people started to settle into places, and with advanced farming techniques, we get to have surplus of goods. You can store food. Store food in your barns as well. So as a result, not everyone has to hunt food now. So people can start investing in other trades, and such as the arts, building, and whatnot. The city has developed, was born as a growth of surplus of goods, surplus of food, surplus of money. Today, we can see London is being developed, shaped as a result of surplus of money. It's really interesting that the first city mentioned in the Bible was Enoch, and Cain started that city, and he was a farmer, and he murdered Abel. And we think gentrification is progress and stuff, but could it be that the scripture telling us that progress is not always a good thing? The story of how cities grew can be seen where I live in Hackney, in East London. The Hackney came into being in the Tudor period, where the wealthy of London moved out into the countryside to escape famine, sickness, and diseases and pollution. And over the years, Hackney has grown from a farming village to being considered an inner borough of London. And Hackney was a place for wealthy people to retire. In the 1950s, 60s, Hackney experienced a decline as the middle class moved out of London, as the suburbia has started to take place. At one point, there were more empty homes, empty buildings than people living in Hackney. And in recent years, the Olympics have put a spotlight back on Hackney and highlighted its potential. And middle classes have started to move back into the area. So I think the story is about a city, and the story of gentrification is a story of power and migration. And it's just gentrification is about who has the power to determine what our cities will look like. And in terms of what gets built and what does not get built, what kind of housing gets built, will affordable housing will be built in a certain area or not. It's also about a power to determine what activities can take place in a certain area and what activities cannot take place. For example, in Hackney last year, there was a big campaign to the council wanted to put in a public space protection order to ban homeless people from sleeping rough in our parks, in our neighborhoods, and the ban includes no drinking. Homeless people cannot drink in a park, cannot sleep rough in the park as a result, among other things. But the funny thing is that this ban but the homeless people will not be able to drink, but in the park. But white middle-class hipsters will be able to enjoy having a beer in a sunny day in our parks. So the hypocrisy. So it's determining who gets to enjoy having a nice drink on a sunny day in the park and who doesn't. Last but not least, it's about the power, who gets to tell the story of what's happening in our neighborhood. It's like, it reminds me of those saying that the history is told from the vantage points of the victors. I went on a cable car ride across the River Thames with my daughter, and it's an attraction. It just takes you across the river. It's about a 30-minute ride. And I got on, and there was like a video playing talking about how the area, East London, is changing so fast, and how it was Europe's biggest regeneration project, and how it's going to bring in jobs, going to create new homes and everything. It's going to be wonderful for everyone. And I sat there in the cable car and went, can't wait to get off this ride. It was sickening to hear this story, because I knew my friends, my neighbors would not agree with this, because they are feeling squeezed out of East London, and it's only one side of the story gets told, and who has money, who has the power, who will get heard the loudest. And we end up creating cities in our own image, and to shape our cities in our own interests and desires at the expense of others results in fragmentation, loneliness, as the gap between those who have power and those who don't become more obvious. An example of this can be seen in how my neighborhood used to be the sixth most deprived borough in the country, but we are now just 49th most deprived. We jumped that much in 5 years' time. This is due to the influx of people, middle class, moving into our neighborhood in the last few years. However, this does not mean that poverty is on the decrease. Recent statistics have shown that homelessness has increased by 32% since 2014. And furthermore, more than 30% of school children in my neighborhood live in poverty. So as a result, I find myself live in a neighborhood that is increasingly becoming fragmented, in which the two worlds rarely collide, as the middle class more and more shape the neighborhood I live in into their image. So following the way of Jesus means to reclaim our neighborhood. Reclaim the right of the city for everyone means to cultivate cities that are shaped in the image of God. If humanity is shaped in the image of God, then our communities, our neighborhoods, when redeemed, are a macro reflection of what it means to be shaped as the image of God. And I just want to get into some practical steps real quick, because we have 8 minutes, time flies. For quick examples, to reclaim our neighborhood, take time to listen to what's happening, ask questions, listen to stories of people. You know, people often like to talk about being a voice for the oppressed, being a voice for those who have no voice. You know, that's a misguided conception. You know, the oppressed, people who are being oppressed have their own voices. We just need to listen to them. And we just need to let them talk. So it's through listening that we can begin to empower our neighbors. And take time to reflect on how we might be participating in gentrification, knowingly or unknowingly, by the choices we make. For example, when we go out for a coffee or a drink or a sandwich, think about the places we go to. Are they places that everyone can go to? Do they fit into the social landscape of our existing communities? Do they hire local people? Can people afford to eat there? Other examples is to question tactics that claims to be about safety. You know, we may be told that banning homeless people from sleeping rough, it might be about being safety. But really, it's not about being safe, it's just about keeping undesirable people out of our neighborhoods. And other ways to get involved is to, you know, get to know the tenant rights in your area, get to know what's going on, look in the papers, see what's being proposed for development, write to local MPs, councillors, join a protest, and have a say, and share what we learn with others, and stand with others, and reclaiming the right of our cities as a place where everyone can live requires us to let go of our attitudes, to repent, and to practices that made us complicit in gentrification, letting go our attitude towards wealth and power, and cultivating new habits and that better expresses love for our neighbors in practical ways. I think we can take some questions now.
Thank you, Rob. Just want to go back to an earlier statement. Sarah Warburton responded to your comment about the sense of hopelessness, and she stated that I think that the sense of hopelessness is felt by many communities at the moment and feel that there is a dying hope, agreeing with you, and then she claims, and we do reclaim that hope through all that Jesus was and is, as you had mentioned as well. Mike asked, Rob, it seems from your experience of squatter communities that there is a real resonance with some kingdom values. Are there practices that are part of squatter lifestyle that are prophetic? Are there practices that we should be adopting in Christian communities? That's a great question.
Yeah. Yes, definitely. Listening to the smallest voices, that's a big anarchist value, and making decisions in light of how it's going to affect the people the decision is going to impact. And that's a big one. Other practices, standing up for rights for others, or have to feel welcome, is inclusion in our communities, and so they have everyone has a right to a place to live and right to aspire in life.
And Richard says, allied to the question by Mike, do you have any suggestions of what churches do practically or can do practically to create space for people finding themselves priced out of an area?
That's a good question. In the UK right now, there's a perfect storm brewing for the church. Declining church attendance and rising property values are causing a lot of churches to sell their buildings, knock it down, or knock the buildings down and develop flats on top of a church, and there's one church nearby where I live, and the church decided to knock down the entire building, and they built flats on top of it, and to make it worse, none of it was made available as social housing. And so what kind of message are we sending as a church? We need to rediscover the primal calling of caring for the marginalized, and so reflecting what does the gospel look like, and how we take place, and churches can reach out to the local community, find out what's going on, and go to protests, putting their weight behind campaigns and projects that are happening.
Okay, all right.
Yeah.
I just want to take a moment to allow Enton to step in. He has some final instructions in terms of wrapping up our time. And so, Enton, would you join us on screen?
Sure. And I'll just throw my voice in and then let more questions come. Stan, for you and Rob. Rob, thanks so much for all you've presented so far. First of all, we have two quick questions for those of you that have participated with the webinar. The first is, how helpful was the presentation, the content, and the learning that Rob has shared with us? And second, how well did this webinar format work for you? If you take a moment just to answer those two questions, that would be great. And then for those of you from the Church of the Brethren Seeking Continuing Education units, I've posted the instructions right there, and I'll put the link into a live link into the chat window, and so that you can do that after our conversation is over, or to keep that website available to be able to request your CEUs. But then, Rob and Stan, I'll just hand it back to you for a couple more questions if you want to continue for another minute.
Okay. Thank you, Anton. And thank you, everyone that's been with us. I do have a question. Rob, in what ways is gentrification pushed by technology and globalization? There's a sense within the, I guess, if you want to call it, international corporations, where the things that they see as the big accelerators of continuous change are technology, globalization, revamping organizational models, and competition. And of course, the two big drivers are technology and globalization. How are those two factors impacting communities and gentrification? That from your vantage point.
Technology is is increasing the pace of gentrification. The internet, for example, where the world is smaller now, and many developments are owned by foreign investors now, from China, Hong Kong, Singapore, and so on. And so they get a first crack at buying these places before local people can get in on these places. And so it's playing a huge problem, and people who don't even live here, or they don't even come here, and they buy up properties. As for globalization, it's companies that run the world. Unfortunately, they are pushing for change, and they have the power. The politicians who make decisions, they're being influenced by them, lobbyists,
okay.
And it's all about
money. Sarah asked you, would you ever see a place in with Christians getting involved through the political party system, or do you think that we should stay on the side of protest?
Personally, I would say on the side of protest, because any political party will hijack the way of Jesus, would adopt Jesus' values their own, and to follow Jesus, to declare Jesus is Lord, is to denounce the political system as we know it, and to we're not going to live according to those values. We don't play to those games, for that game. And so for me, I find real change.
Mike adds that a book worth reading for those of us interested is The Spiritual City by Philip Sheldrake. And regarding our topic, and Enton has put at least the Amazon site up. Talk about globalization and technology right there. But hey, sometimes you need it. And then also Bruce and several others are just Rob stating their words of appreciation to your presentation and just the content, which has been so thought-provoking. Well, Rob, thank you so much. I enjoyed hearing your story, how the community responded when you and your wife were having a baby, and how they welcomed you in, and how you became, a spiritual guide and mentor for so many in the community in which you find and are building relationships as well. And that to me was fascinating. And thank you for your presentation today. And to everyone that has joined us on today's webcast, we appreciate you being here and participating, asking questions, and giving some comments as well. And as Enton said earlier in the webcast, there are several other webinars that are planned as well. One coming up on in 2 weeks from today, and then 2 more planned for the month of May, and then I believe 1 in June as well. So some good thought-provoking content that we'll be delivering to you, and some great ways to interact with each other, to network, and also to hear what's going on in various parts of our world. And we can't do it without people like Rob, who have given their time and energy to put this presentation together to share from their experience. So thank you very much, Rob. Thank you, everyone, for attending. And we will be closing out this webinar. So thank you all. Blessings. God's peace and grace go with you all. Good afternoon or good night, wherever you are connecting from. Bye-bye.